There is something strange happening at Real Madrid right now, because when you look at the names in this squad, it almost feels unfair. Kylian Mbappé, Vinícius Júnior, Yan Diomande, Jude Bellingham, Arda Güler, Bernardo Silva, Endrick, Brahim Diaz, Carlos Espí, and this isn't even the complete list. But here's the interesting part. Real Madrid haven't simply collected a group of superstars. They may have accidentally built something much more dangerous. They may have built a squad specifically suited to José Mourinho. And after watching the early signs of his preseason, that possibility is becoming harder to ignore. José Mourinho officially returned to Real Madrid in June, signing a 3-year contract through 2029, and his first job was obvious. He didn't need to rebuild Real Madrid from zero. He needed to give this ridiculous amount of talent a structure, because that is where this project becomes fascinating. Real Madrid's preseason isn't finished yet, so we obviously can't make huge conclusions, but the early signs are interesting. Madrid beat Alcorcón 1-0 in their first training match, then defeated Leganés 4-1. Against Fiorentina, they drew 2-2 after taking a 2-goal lead and then conceding twice in the second half. They then beat Ferencváros before defeating Deportivo 1-0 in the Trofeo Teresa Herrera. So far, Mourinho's team remains unbeaten in preseason, but the results aren't actually the most interesting part. The tactical clues are, Mourinho has repeatedly experimented with a 4-2-3-1, and that formation immediately creates a fascinating picture. 2 midfielders, 1 number 10, 2 wingers, 1 striker. Exactly the kind of structure that could allow Madrid's attacking talent to remain dangerous without completely losing their defensive organization. And against Deportivo, we saw another important clue. Bernardo Silva operated in the midfield. Arda Güler played behind the striker. Vinícius started from the left. Endrick operated centrally, and Mourinho continued experimenting with different combinations. The team is clearly not finished, but the blueprint is beginning to appear. And that brings us to the biggest question. What does Mourinho actually want this Real Madrid attack to look like? Let's start with Kylian Mbappé, because his numbers are already ridiculous. In the 2025-26 season, Mbappé scored 42 goals in 44 matches for Real Madrid. He finished as La Liga's top scorer with 25 goals, and also led the Champions League scoring charts with 15. 42 goals. And yet, Real Madrid still ended the season without the major trophy they wanted. That tells you something important. The problem was never simply Mbappé's ability to score. The problem was how the team around him functioned. And that brings us to Vinícius Júnior. Real Madrid recently removed one of the biggest uncertainties surrounding the Brazilian by extending his contract until June 2032. Since joining Madrid, Vinícius has become one of the most important attacking players in the club's modern history. He has produced 128 goals and 100 assists for the club. So Madrid have 2 elite attackers. The problem? They both naturally love attacking from the left. Mbappé likes drifting left before attacking diagonally. Vinícius wants to isolate defenders from the left wing. If both players occupy the same zones, Madrid can become predictable. But Mourinho has a very simple solution. Don't ask them to do the same thing. Keep Vinícius wider, let him stretch the defensive line, and move Mbappé more consistently into central areas. Suddenly, the 2 players aren't competing for the same space. They're attacking different spaces, and that could completely change the relationship between them. Vinícius can destroy the fullback. Mbappé can attack the space between the center backs, and when the defense collapses towards those 2 players, Real Madrid have another weapon, Yan Diomande. Diomande is perhaps the most intriguing addition to this attack, because he gives Madrid something different. He isn't simply another player who wants the ball to his feet. His value comes from carrying the ball forward and breaking defensive structures. That matters enormously in Mourinho's football. Imagine Real Madrid recovering possession. Vinícius is already sprinting down the left. Mbappé is attacking the space through the middle, and Diomande receives the ball on the opposite side. The defender now has a horrible decision. Follow Vinícius, protect against Mbappé, or step toward Diomande. Choose the wrong option, and Madrid are already running at your back 4. That's the terrifying possibility. This isn't just a front 3 with 3 talented players. It's 3 different problems. Vinícius gives you 1 versus 1 ability. Diomande gives you ball carrying and progression. Mbappé gives you devastating movement and finishing. And Mourinho's football has always been extremely dangerous when his attackers have space to attack. The difference is that this time, he has ridiculous amounts of speed. This is where people sometimes misunderstand José Mourinho. Mourinho doesn't automatically mean defensive football. His 2011-12 Real Madrid team scored 121 goals in La Liga and collected 100 points. That team wasn't built around dominating possession for the sake of it. It was built around controlling space and destroying opponents when the opportunity appeared. Cristiano Ronaldo, Karim Benzema, Angel Di Maria, Mesut Ozil, they didn't need 20 passes to create danger. Sometimes they needed 5 seconds. And that is exactly why this current Real Madrid squad is so interesting. Mourinho doesn't necessarily need to make Madrid slower. He needs to make them more organized. Because imagine what happens when Real Madrid Madrid win the ball with this front three. Vinícius is already running. Diomande is carrying the ball. Mbappé is attacking the center, and behind them, you have Bellingham. That is where things get frightening. Bellingham doesn't need to be the player who creates every attack. In fact, he might be even more dangerous when he doesn't, because his greatest attacking weapon is his movement. Imagine Carlos Espí occupying both center backs. Vinícius is stretching the left side, Diomande is stretching the right. Mbappé is threatening the space behind the defensive line. Now look at Bellingham. Who's tracking him? If the center back follows him, space opens for Mbappé. If the midfielder follows him, Bernardo Silva can receive the ball. If nobody follows him, Bellingham arrives in the box. That is the beauty of this squad. Madrid don't need one superstar to solve every problem. They have different players who solve different problems. And then there is Arda Güler. Güler has been one of the standout players of Madrid's preseason, and Mourinho now has a fascinating decision, because Güler can play as a number 10. He can operate from wider areas. He can also drop deeper and help progress the ball. Against Deportivo, he again showed why his creativity could be so valuable. But the bigger question is what happens when Bellingham returns fully, Mbappé returns, and the entire squad is available? Because suddenly Mourinho has too many options, and that is a good problem, but it is still a problem. If Mourinho uses Bellingham as the number 10, where does Guler play? If Bernardo is in midfield, who partners him? Does Valverde play? Does Camavinga play? Does Tchouaméni play? And this may actually be one of Mourinho's most important decisions, not choosing his best 11 individually, choosing the 11 that complement each other. This is where Carlos Espí becomes extremely interesting, because when everyone talks about Mbappé, Vinícius, Diomande, and Bellingham, Espí doesn't sound like the biggest name, but tactically, he could be incredibly important. Real Madrid officially signed the 21-year-old from Levante until 2031. Before joining Madrid, Espí had played 66 matches for Levante and scored 20 goals. He was also named the best under-23 player in La Liga last season. And what does he give Mourinho? A genuine number 9. Someone who can occupy center backs, someone who can attack crosses, someone who can stay central, someone who can create space for the players around him. And that gives Mourinho another tactical option. Against a team defending high, use Mbappé through the middle. Against a low block, maybe use Espí as the reference point. Let Espí occupy the center backs. Let Vinícius attack the fullback. Let Diomande attack from the opposite side, and allow Bellingham to arrive late. Suddenly, Madrid don't need to attack every opponent in exactly the same way. That is what makes squad depth valuable. Not having 11 superstars, having 11 different solutions. Which brings us to perhaps the biggest individual dilemma, Endrick, because the Brazilian doesn't lack talent. The problem is minutes, and now his pathway into the team has become even more complicated. Mbappé is here. Espí has been signed. Vinícius is established. Diomande has arrived. Brahim is still competing, and Rodrigo remains part of the squad. So where does Endrick actually play? During preseason, Mourinho has already experimented with him centrally, and against Deportivo, Endrick started as the number 9 in the 4-2-3-1. That is significant, because perhaps Mourinho doesn't see Endrick as another winger. Perhaps his future at Madrid is still through the middle, but if that's the case, he is competing directly with Mbappé and Espí. For Endrick, Mourinho's biggest challenge may not be developing him, it may be finding him enough minutes. And now, we reach the signing that could quietly become one of the most important, Bernardo Silva. Real Madrid officially announced his arrival on a contract through June 2028. At 31, Bernardo isn't coming to Madrid simply to add another famous name. He's coming with something this squad desperately needs: control. Because Madrid already have players who can create chaos. Mbappé creates chaos. Bellingham creates chaos. Guler creates chaos. Bernardo can organize that chaos. He can slow the game down. He can escape pressure. He can find the next pass. And importantly, he has the tactical intelligence to play in different midfield roles. Against Deportivo, Bernardo was one of Madrid's standout performers, showing progression, dribbling, and defensive work from midfield. That is exactly the type of flexibility Mourinho can use. Because not can Mourinho protect all of this? Because think about what happens when Madrid attack. What the wingers go forward. Bellingham attacks the box. The fullbacks push higher. The number 10 looks for the final pass. The striker attacks the center. Suddenly, you have a huge number of players ahead of the ball. And if possession is lost, who protects the defense? That's where Mourinho's real work begins. Because Mbappé isn't going to become a defensive midfielder. Vinícius isn't suddenly going to spend 90 minutes tracking fullbacks. Diomande is at his best when he can attack. Bellingham needs freedom them to arrive in dangerous positions, so Mourinho needs structure behind them, a compact midfield, clear pressing responsibilities, good rest defense, and enough defensive quality to survive when Madrid lose the ball. That is why the early preseason results shouldn't make us think this team is already finished. It isn't. The 2-2 draw with Fiorentina showed Madrid could dominate phases and then lose control. The later matches have produced wins, but the football is still clearly a work in progress. Even the 1-0 victory over Deportivo was far from perfect. Mourinho himself described the preseason as preparation and said the serious work starts next week. And that is probably the most accurate way to describe this team. The pieces are there. The system is still being built. That's the question. Not whether Real Madrid have enough talent. They obviously do. Not whether Mbappé can score goals. He already scored 42 last season. Not whether Vinícius is world class. His new long-term contract tells you exactly how highly Madrid value him. The real question is whether José Mourinho can connect all of these pieces. Can he separate Mbappé and Vinícius into complementary spaces? Can Diomande stretch the opposite side? Can Bellingham become the fourth attacker? Can Guler provide the creativity? Can Bernardo control the rhythm? Can Espí give Madrid a genuine number 9? Can Endrick find a role? And most importantly, can Mourinho create enough defensive structure to allow all of these players to attack? Because if the answer is yes, Real Madrid won't simply have one of the deepest attacks in Spain. They could have one of the most difficult attacks in Europe to defend. High defensive line, Mbappé and Vinícius attack the space. Low block, Espí can occupy the center backs, protect the wings, Guler and Bellingham can attack centrally, protect the middle, Diomande and Vinícius can isolate defenders outside, try to control the tempo, Bernardo can change it. That's the real difference. Real Madrid aren't building one way to beat you. They're building several, and José Mourinho now has the responsibility of turning all those possibilities into one coherent team. The preseason results are encouraging. The tactical signs are promising, but the real test is about to begin. Because next week, the friendlies stop. La Liga begins. And that's when we find out whether this is simply another collection of superstars, or whether José Mourinho has built something genuinely frightening. Because if Mourinho gets this right, La Liga doesn't just have another Real Madrid. It has a problem.